Hi, this is Sam Greenwood for RunOnce.com. I am starting a new series called 10 World Series of Poker Main Event Lessons. I'm going to make a series here where I kind of go through these lessons, talk them through. I have poker news updates or Poker Go or YouTube clips of the hands when necessary, and then I'll augment them by, going through some sims that show these hands as well. So I do not know how long the series will be. Again, we have 10 lessons. I don't think it'll be one video. My guess is it'll be a 4 or 5 video series. And each one will focus on a lesson or two. I mean, if I said 4 or 5 videos, it would have to at least be 2. Before I do that, I want to get to the countdown of the lessons, because what you'll end up seeing here is that a lot of these leaks, though overlapping, these hands will many of them take place, and then I need to bucket them into one category. But the general thing, I think, is there's this idea I feel around recreational poker players and amateur poker players that they are not very aggressive. Being aggressive is sort of an attribute that's usually given to professional poker players. Well, there's two, I think, macro things going on here. One is a lot of, I played my first hand of online poker 20 years ago. I've seen people come and go. So a lot of recreational players are people who at one point in their time were strong winning poker players. So they are aggressive. They were taught to be aggressive. They know how to play aggressively. They just don't have necessarily the fundamentals. So it's kind of an unchecked aggression where they're not really sure what they're doing. And then the other thing is there were a lot of people who I think bet or raise often and linearly, so they might not be bluffing. And I mean, if you look no further than the champion himself, Michael Mizrachi, they're not really bluffing, but they're just betting a lot. And that is an aggressive, so they are aggressive. Are they loose? Maybe, maybe not. Are they bluffing a lot? Maybe, maybe not. But what you tend to see in this dynamic where people bet in some spots too small, but often they bet on sort of connected boards. They bet too large. They don't have natural bluffs. They end up bluffing with hands too strong on the river because those are the hands they want to bluff with. And the same thing holds with the opponent. Well, if I'm betting a polar range on the flop and turn, and you call twice with second pair and a flush fills on the river, your second pair should have some showdown. But if I'm always betting top pair, if I'm always betting flush draws, then when you get second pair, then you might just need to bluff all the time. Or people choose to bluff because they feel they have no showdown because they're upping at such a linear range. So even though we have 10 sort of distinct lessons that I'll go through here, they're often quite interrelated. It's usually people bet too much, they bet too linearly, they bet too large. Then people who try to bluff what they think is the bottom of the range, which is a hand that is actually supposed to show down for a lot, but then they end up needing to bluff those hands. So it all kind of works in concert with itself pretty well. So the 10 lessons here, I'll stop betting or raising for information. It's kind of crazy to me that that was kind of a lesson of raising to see where you're at was considered something Fish would do in 2005, and now it feels like it's coming back in style. Number 2, pot odds matter. Yeah, this is the fundamental concept of poker, basically, where there is always, because of the blinds and the antes, there will always be dead money in the pot. There will be a lot of most hands where you call a bet, you should expect to lose the hand, but you're just getting pot odds and they matter. And then it doesn't matter how confident you are that your opponent is never bluffing here or whatever, you have to call. C-bet tight or out of position. This is a very common one, especially multi-way. You're out of position. Playing out of position is hard. It's a lot harder if the pot gets very large. You're a lot more likely to make a mistake that might cost you a lot of money. play various c-bet sizes. The number of times I just see people, especially you can see it on live stream, just kind of like toss out a bet without even considering. Like they just check to them and they just bet as if it's like dog checking from the big blind or something. Like there's no thought process, there's no analysis. They just auto bet because they raised pre-flop. They auto bet quarter part. They don't really think about it. Don't always bluff marginal hands. This kind of ties into pot odds matter as well. With like, yeah, just as sometimes you need to call the river expecting to have the best hand a quarter of the time and your opponent bet half pot. Sometimes you have a hand, you expect to lose with it, you check and you win 18% of the time, and that's fine. It's not necessarily what you want, but if you can get 18% of the pot by checking back, even if you might win the pot more when you bet, you're putting more money in the pot. So it's kind of the opposite side of that. Well, pot odds matter, mean, hey, there's a lot of money in the pot, you expect to lose the hand. Just call, because if you do, you're getting a good price. Where don't always bluff with kind of marginal hands. The logic here is more, yeah, you'll win the pot more often by betting, but you need to put more money in the pot. Number 6 is a really big one, which is you can slow play. The solver slow plays all the time, and people just love putting in like the final bet with a good hand, like on the flop or on the turn, and it creates this dynamic where people will like, if you go back to lesson number 1, people check raise the flop for information, and then people 3-bet the flop with a good hand, and then you're giving them the information and letting them fold. And to me, that's just kind of crazy. It's like the solver play is often to slow play. You can slow play, it's fine. You don't, sometimes you'll have bad runouts, it doesn't matter. Number 7, 8, and 9 are small ones. Well, 7 and 8 are smaller ones. But if you can't call a 3-bet with certain hands, not always, not like, if you've king jack off, you can raise fold. But the number of times I see people open a hand like pocket 2s in like a marginal situation and then fold to a 3-bet, and I go, the whole value of these small pairs is that they can flop sets and flop concentrated equity. So if you can't call a 3-bet with it, small pocket pairs play very well in 3-bet pots. They're very good at cracking like aces. If you're going to open a hand like pocket 2s, especially if you're opening it under the gun 9-handed, you need to call a 3-bet with it. Like, otherwise, open fold. It frustrates me so much to see people make these. It's because the thing that frustrates me, they're making 2 mistakes in the hand. They're opening it when they should open fold it, and then they're folding to a 3-bet when they should call a 3-bet. Number 8 is old players bluff. This ties into what I said at the beginning. There are guys who now, maybe played online poker, picked up online poker when they were 30, 20 years ago, and then are now 50. I don't know if that's old, but, it's in the realm of possibility. But even when I first started playing poker, I have a story about that I'll save for the actual old players bluff section, so you can watch it later. But there's just this weird, there are old guys who never bluff. A story I've maybe told on Runner once before, but I was deep in the 10K 6 max, and an older guy kept 3-betting George Danzer, and he kept saying, I have the best hand. Like, after the hand, like George Danzer would flip up ace jack off, and he would say, I had you beat. And it was clear to me the old guy kept 3-betting small pocket pairs, like 4s, 5s, and 6s from the table talk. And George didn't understand what he was saying, and he thought he just kept running into queens. So my point is, like, shortcutting to, this is like an old guy, he'll never bluff, I don't think is accurate. There were all sorts of old players. They fit all sorts of player profiles. They're all capable of bluffing, we're at a pretty advanced stage in terms of the life cycle of poker, and yeah, old players can bluff. And then small bets carry a lot of weight multi-way. So all that is to say, like, in a heads-up pot, if you bet, you might get these kind of like peels with the defense frequency is on one guy. And you might, then that one player might have to defend all sorts of weird hands, like backdoor flush draws, backdoor straight draws, low pocket pairs, all sorts of weird floats. But in the multi-way part, they can't, you have to be worried about the player behind. C-bet ranges tighten up, it all tightens up. So if a board is like, 9-8-7 flush draw in a multi-way part, you might be able to get somebody to fold an 8 or a 7 with like a quarter part bet. You don't need to bet large to get them to fold these hands. So there's not necessarily a reason to bet large. And yeah, you can just kind of play this, sort of more cagey kind of small bet game where you get, with each action, you get more information about your opponent's range instead of just throwing money in the pot blindly. And number 10 is a big one that, like, some of these I think new to the current life cycle of poker to some degree, just go all in pre-flop. The number of times watching the footage where, like, somebody would have ace-king and, like, 50 big blinds and somehow not go all in pre-flop and do something weird and then set themselves up to maybe fold post-flop. Just go all in pre-flop. Playing kind of like narrow range spots where you have like 1.3x pot to play is extremely hard, and you're live to make a big mistake from time to time. You might not want to go all in because it's a big tournament. It's a lot of money on the line. You don't want to leave it up to a coin flip, but hey, that's tournament poker. Sometimes you do just need to get all in pre-flop. I mean, again, to talk about the guy who won, Michael Mizrachi got all in pre-flop, like, I think somebody said 10 straight times and won every single one. So you're probably not going to do that, but he understands the value that, hey, in a tournament, in order to win, sometimes you just need to go all in. So that being said, we'll try to get through as many lessons as we can today. We'll start with number 1, stop raising for information. Raising for information is a useful poker play, but it is rarely used. And the reason why it's rarely used is it's often an inexpensive play. You might get the information you need, but you're paying for it. So you can check call a half pot bet, or you can 3x that bet and find out where you're at. Well, now you need to put in not 3 times as much money because you're 3xing the raise, but you're putting in 2 times as much money. So it is expensive. And denying equity, I think, is something that a lot of poker players, nobody likes getting sucked out on. And I think a lot of sort of mediocre poker players really want to focus on denying equity. And it just is not that valuable a thing. Especially if the spots will say you might have like top pair on like, you have like a pair of 9s on 9-3-2 rainbow. It's like, well, yeah, the 10 jack, queen, king, ace, that is a lot of the deck, but it's not like this huge amount of the deck. I mean, it is like a third of the deck, and like it's not always going to hit your opponent. Sometimes bad cards that roll off will appear bad for your opponent, so that like they'll look like they hit your range, so your opponent will slow down. There's all sorts of things like that. The other thing is, if you open the door to get bluffed, it can really be a disastrous play. So we're talking about, one example is, hey, you raise second pair, you get 3-bet by top pair, you fold, you give up your like 20% equity or whatever, and you paid for that information. That's not great. That's an expensive play. But if you get 3-bet bluffed, it's like, okay, now maybe you're at 80%, 70%, and you're getting bluffed. And you're putting in all this extra money too. That can really be a disastrous play. And the final thing I want to talk about here is that on connected boards, patience is a virtue. And what I mean by that is, if you've ace king of clubs and you're told the flop is going to be 6-5-4 all outs, you might just open fold pre-flop. You have a bad hand. Similarly, if you have, as we'll see soon, aces on 8-7-6, well, if the turn is a 9 or a 10 or an 8 or a 7 or a 6, you might be able to actually get away from aces. Like, that's not such a bad outcome. So I think what happens is a lot of times people want to fast play their hand before like a bad turn or whatever comes, when actually it's the opposite. Well, you want to make sure you have a good hand before putting your money in the pot. And if you have a hand like aces on 8-7-6 and the board runs out 2-2, now you're ahead. Now you're beating all the two pair. You have you lose your straights and sets. It's unlikely your opponent has hit one or twos. You have a very good hand. If the board runs out like 9, just a 9, it's like now you lose. There's a bunch of two pairs. You lose to any 10. You lose to any 5. You still lose few sets and stuff like that have you beat. So by not putting money in on the flop and seeing the 9 turn, it's actually good for you. You've prevented yourself from losing like a much larger pot. So with that being said, now I'm going to pull up. We're 20 minutes into this video, so realistically we probably only have one lesson today, and we're going to go through the stop raising for information hands. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 handed here. Under the gun 7, Shotley raises, and it is on Wichitansky. I'm sorry, I'm not even going to try with this one. We'll call him Wiss. Who flat 7s in the cutoff. Lot hero Gira has ace 10 of hearts in the small blind, and he called. And our friend Windsor called queen jack off in the big. All of these plays totally normal, fine, standard. The flop is 7-8-6 rainbow. I think it's possible that the small blind and the big blind play leads with range here, but Lord Hero actually has a kind of reasonable hand if you want to lead with range, where he has the gut shot and an up backdoor. Windsor again, like maybe he gets to lead, but not with this hand. Like he'd have hands in his range you'd want to lead, not queen jack, nothing. 7s bets pretty quickly and bets half pot, which is like a pretty loud size here on a connected board. Versus block, Lotero would have a kind of close call here. Close decision, not a close call. But I mean, it could be a call, could be a raise, could be a fold. But half pot, with a guy quickly betting half pot, I think you can fold. And what we'll see from Shotley here is that Shotley takes his time and he cuts out a raise. We'll see it here. He's 2.2 million and he raises to 750 or 775, which is 30% of his stack. And what you'll see here is pretty quickly and confidently Wichitansky announces all in. And he ends up folding aces. And I think the fold is fine, but there's two issues here. One is he bet half pot 4 ways into like a small blind range that could have a lot of like 9-10 suited, could have a lot of sets, a big blind range that could easily have straights, sets, 2 pair, etc. And it's just he's representing a pretty strong range here, and his bluffs, if he has them, are probably hands that are just like, ace-9 suited, jack-9, like open-end straight draws. They're doing pretty well. And I think you could maybe even check fold. Obviously, there's some turns you could check fold, but even a blank turn you could maybe check fold versus a guy who bets half pot on the flop. There's just no reason to. The information you're getting here is just not that valuable. I forgot there was table talk here. We can't really hear it. Because the players aren't mic'd up. It's just the outer table. He asked for Spider-Man so he could put it on top. So I think the fold here is good, but again, it's possible he could have just check folded on some turns, and instead he's just putting in an extra 525k chip. So the question is the information he got worth it? And the other thing is aces is this kind of perfect hand where actually if he is bluffing, you might want to let him, if he has a hand like King Queen or King Jack or King 10 or something, you want to let him peel. You don't need protection. So the concern is here, well, what if he had nines or 8-9 suited or something like that? And that's just another reason not to raise, because if he has nines, nines has 10 outs versus you. If he has 9-8 suited, 9-8 suited has 13 outs versus you. You're not really pushing an equity edge versus those hands. So again, even tens has a bunch of outs versus you. So you're either drawing to 2 outs, or he could have 9-10 suited, you're just drawing like 2 running cards. But you don't have much equity versus like the top of his value range. You're kind of only flipping versus his sort of like linear semi-bluffing kind of that chunk of his range. And the information he's getting is just not worth the extra 525,000 chips. Again, there are also some like live read things here, which is okay. Like now he's again from reading the update, this guy was pretty chatty and doing a lot of like antics and stuff. But like, come on, the guy who snap bets, the guy who instantly bets 250K on the flop is high-fiving people as they sit down, is asking for this Friday win thing. Like, this is not the, I'm sure he's done these antics before and been bluffing, but like, again, I don't think he's doing this with Jack 10. I mean, he does find the fold, so it's fine. But even more reason, I think, to not check raise the flop, because he's the type of player who might just give you a bunch of information about his hand later in the hand. So the main sort of takeaway here is just the information you're getting isn't that valuable. You actually have a hand that wants to see safe cards on the turn and the river. That's kind of your the key to this hand for you. And I see this a lot where people even you can see it with their actions here, where if you raised with the plan of snap folding to shove, at least that is a plan. But sometimes I feel what people do is they just put in a big chunk of chips hoping the hand will somehow become easier to play. And the big problem with this logic is it's that you're paying for that privilege. You're paying. We said he put in a third of his stack, but I mean, the extra 525K chips he's putting in, 20% of his, 23% of his stack. It just can't be worth it to put in all that extra money. And this is not a spot where he had the board's 8-5-2 and he check raises aces and then he gets shoved on and he's like, oh man, maybe I ran into it, This is just a spot where he just doesn't even have that good a hand. Four-way pot under the gun 7, cut off small blind, big blind. Aces is just not that good a hand at 7-8, 8-7-6, and he's just raising to see where he's at, and it's costing him a lot of money. And again, I don't know anything about this guy, but he's taking off the sunglasses, he's chatting to everyone at the table. He looked like the happiest man in the world. I do not know what's taking him so long. I will say this. He's saying fold Jack's no good. The other thing that I think is funny about this is, somebody who, when I was doing punt of the day, I was kind of fast forwarding through a lot of the footage because I just wanted to see notable hands. I sometimes missed out on some of the details. Any hand I wrote about specifically I looked at, but yeah. I mean, my guess is what's going on here is that this guy has shown down some crazy hands, and he now is he's reading this chattiness and this table talk and all that as being potentially weak, or maybe he thought, hey, this guy's a wild card, so since he's a wild card from the jump, my plan was to raise stack off on the flop, and then I changed my mind. But let's see, does he show the sevens? Yeah. So again, you might go, hey, he made a nice fold there. And he did, but he cost himself 525k chips in the process. Now, granted, the flip side is maybe if it's me, I check all the flop, the turns a deuce, and I'm out of the tournament to 212th place. So you never know. The next hand I'm going to talk about here is a hand that went kind of viral. In the previous hand, you might have not have cared for me muting the stream because you might have wanted to hear the table talk. For this one, I think we're all happy that it got muted. So, Will Kassouf 3-bets aces and 100 deep. Mr. Swift 4-bets pocket nines. And my issue with this whole thing is, again, he is finding out where he's at. Again, it's extremely expensive. Even for chips 100 big blinds deep, you don't need to make it like 3.3x here with nines. And then nines is also just the absolute worst type of hand to be 4-betting with here. Again, it flops concentrated equity, especially with someone like Kassouf, who's live to just 3-bet hands with 2 cards lower than a 9 of them. You want to let those keep those second best hands in the pot. So same kind of thing. He found out where he was with nines, but instead of paying 300k to potentially crack aces or see a flop, he's paying $1 million to fold out a bunch of bluffs. And yeah, this is a pretty, I think, like normal kind of poker hand in the sense that, how do I put it? It's a pretty kind of normal poker hand in the sense where it's like, hey, if you want to talk about 2005, 2006 poker, where people understood, hey, you don't 4-bet without a plan. And it might be kind of obvious to some of the people watching this, hey, like, obviously you don't 4-bet 9-2. But the amount of times I saw play, this is like the sort of like the worst version of this hand, but the amount of times I saw some sort of version of this play where somebody just 4-bet kind of like a medium strength hand because they didn't want to play out of position in a 3-bet pot, and figure out where they're at is wild to me. Like I've seen people, 4-bet fold jacks here a lot, and those ones become the most costly too. If you 4-bet fold a hand that could call a shove instead of calling it, that's just like so costly and such a problem. Again, we're going to see a lot of, look at these antics. He's standing up. He's counting the stack. He's right next to him. You know how many chips he has. His stacks could not be like, he has like 5 stacks of, all his stacks are neatly in 20s. He had the easiest to count stack in the world, and we need to see these dumb antics. It's so annoying. Sorry for making you guys relive them. But the other thing I will say with Swift is, like, if you want me to give some credit of sorts to Will, definitely part of what's going on here is, hey, he gets under people's skins. He causes them to do dumb things. He causes them to make crazy plays. I don't think Swift would have 4-bet 9s with many other people in this tournament, but he's one of them. The other thing, I can't believe we're like this deep into me talking about this hand and I haven't even got to like another key part, which is it's cut off with button too. It's cut off min raise button 3-bet to only 3x 90 big blinds deep. Like, this is not, this is fault where like you're probably just about to call a 3-bet with like king 6 suited. Versus Kassouf, I honestly, like, for me, who's comfortable playing a 3-bet pot out of position, I literally would not fold the single hand I opened here, because he only 3-bets to 3x, will very deep. Kassouf, I don't think will actually put much pressure on you post flop. Compared to like the solver, where like if he 3-bet 9-5 off and the flop's ace king 2, I don't think he's just like 3-barreling off all that often. And yeah, he's live to have hands like again, I say 9-5 off because of the 9 high. but whatever, Jack 5 suited or whatever the thing is. I'll also say, what is Kassouf also? Okay, I have two other things here, which is Kassouf's 5-bet makes no sense to me. To me, you either flat because you think you might be getting bluffed, you click it back to try to induce a light 5-bet shove, but again, click it back will be 1.7. Or you just shove to make your hand look like ace king or whatever. Now, one of the things I noted earlier on was I said people don't slow play. Slow play here. Why can't you 3-betting 9-5 off here? Like, I saw some people when they talked about this hand said, oh, Kassouf with his table talk got Swift to dust off 1,000,000 chips with 9s here. If Kassouf flats the 5-bet, there's a really good chance he stacks or stacks the 4-bet. There's a very good chance he stacks him. Like, if somebody here, I think, like, I don't like the 4-bet. Again, I said, like, if I opened Queen 10 off here, I would have called the 3-bet with Kassouf. I'm certainly calling 9s. If I had, like, Jacks plus or Queens plus, I'm probably 4-bet going with it. Or I might 4-bet go with it. Here, they go, oh, you got him to put in 1,000,000 chips. But again, like, I really think, like, again, if he calls, there's 2 million, 2.1, 2.125 in the pot, Swift at 3.6 million back. I think it's a lot more likely you get him to put a money post flop with all that money in the pot than here. And I think, yeah, like I don't like how either of them played this hand. I mean, the open's good and the 3-bet are good. But again, if you want to talk about the theme here, which is about info raising, it's one, the EV of calling is quite high here, and like putting in an extra 700,000 chips is a very expensive move. And instead of putting in an extra 200K, he put in an extra 900K, I guess. And it's not just like that it's the wrong type of hand to 4-bet with, which it is. I'd also add like a small thing here, which is if your guy's whole thing is repeating his catchphrases over and over again, if he's the 9 high like a boss guy, then I think that actually makes 9s a slightly less attractive 4-bet, I would think, because it means he's probably bluffing a little less often, but also because he should have a variety of offsuit 9x hands which you have beat. Unlike the previous hand, I will say, with all the table talk and chatter, Kassouf is capable of bluffing here, except I don't actually think he's capable of bluffing like this. The way he tends to play is sort of like Helmuth, where he loves putting in a bunch of money on early streets with really bad hands, but when all the money goes in, he usually has a good hand. He'll occasionally run a 9 high like a boss bluff. Somebody correct me on this if they feel otherwise, but I feel I've never seen him get all in pre-flop with a bad hand for like his tournament life. And yeah, like I think again, in both these hands they find the foils, but it's not the right one. I'll also say one of the lessons here, if you want to go through the whole like the rundown, is old people don't bluff. Well, if I were to say to you, well, this guy who looks like Swift raises the cutoff to 100K, get 3-bet to 300K. Do you think he makes it 1,000,000? What would be his most common hand? I don't think people would get to 9 very often, So again, these guys are unpredictable. It's not quite as easy to play them as you might think. And yeah, I've the other thing I'll also say once I'm kind of going on rants and talking about stuff here is man, I did not realize how long this hand I was going to pick it, which leads to my other point. People love talking. Obviously, Kassouf's got a lot of his pace of play stuff. Got himself in a lot of trouble like, literally with the clock and all that. But even Swift here is taking forever. And I'll just say that I think there's this idea that, like, oh, like, yeah, someone like Christoph Vogelting is slow, but people love talking about certain guys being slow when they, oh, not. Like, there's no, people who play high rollers aren't doing like 8-minute tanks on like normal pre-flop spots, and they are quite slow. He folds nines, whatever. The end. We're done with this hand. I spent too much time watching Kassouf claiming around. The end. It's over. Apologies for making you watch it. The next one I think is a more common type of play you'll see here, which again is a form of info raising that I see quite a lot, which is here Schwartzberg has 9 big blinds and he shoves. And what you'll see here from Padron is he has it's a 9 big blind shove from Schwartzberg. Padron is in the cutoff with 10s. The stacks behind are 13-4, 9-8, and 32. And he clicks it back here, or does he actually click it back? He makes it bigger than, I forget if he clicks it back or bigger. So a click it back will be 4.8, 9.4, 10.2. And he makes it 11. So even here, he makes it an extra 800K more than he needs to. And there's no reason to do this. If he just flats the 5.4, is Fritas really overcall? Like, Dabrowski and Ponce are playing all in and fold, and if they go all in, you just need to call the end. Fritas is never, I shouldn't say never, is rarely calling the 5.4. Just calling it, he's mostly playing 3-bet fold, and if he does play overcalled, it's not that bad. Like, maybe he'll overcall a range of like 9s and ace queen suited, and the thing is, so again, if you want to talk about like what the sort of threats here, one, equity denial. It's just not that important to knock out Fritas here in the 1% chance he has exactly ace queen. Also, if the board runs out like ace high, you'll likely have very bad equity in the main pot with Schwartzberg. So there's no, like, it doesn't matter that much if you fold because there's a good chance you're losing to Schwartzberg anyways. 2, so the equity denial doesn't matter that much. 2, he doesn't even click it back. He puts in an extra 800K. And 3, it's the thing we just keep talking about in this video where like we've talked in this video about the idea of how get like the money you're spending to get the information is not worth it. That's true. But the other thing here is like you're not even getting that much more additional information here. Like what hands in his range are you folding out by making it this extra money? So general thing here just basically always is if somebody makes a big shove, they're doing a lot of work for you. You don't need to like click it back. They're doing the work of ISOing for you. If somebody shoves for 3 big blinds, yeah, maybe you want to make it 5. If somebody makes it 9, you don't need to make it 17. There's just no reason for it. Totally unnecessary. Costs you a lot in the event you end up folding, and it's all just done in the name of sort of like equity denial. But it's just, again, the price you're paying is just not worth it, and it's not even close to worth it. It also, in theory, lets you play more hands because, like, marginally more, or at least increases the EV of your bottom of range hands. It doesn't always let you play more hands, but say if you did have a call that was like a hand that maybe as a click it back is losing 0.01 of a big blind, then it's probably those sorts of hands cross the threshold. If like your lowest EV call is making like like a quarter of a big blind, then, or your lowest EV click it back is losing a quarter of a big blind, then calling isn't necessarily going to push it over. And yes, just for the max punishment here. Now, again, if Padron just flatted and Fritas shoved, I think he should probably fold. So he might have just folded anyways. But for the max punishment here, he gets the sixes tripled up. And it would have been fun if, like, I always like these sorts of crazy kind of multi-way hands. It would have been fun if Schwartzberg spun it up a little, but he didn't. So I said I was going to try to get through two lessons a video, and we got through one today. Although the first 20 minutes or so were kind of setting the stage. So I'm hoping going forward we'll get a little better. But let's actually just wrap up with do we get a to close with the picture of Sad Padron or no? Yeah. Shouldn't have clicked it back. You should have 5.6 million more chips, my man. Oh no, yeah, 5.6, yeah. And yeah, I mean, yeah, you also could have 70 million chips right now, but that would have been kind of ambitious. So to reiterate, raising for information is a useful poker play, but it's rarely used. And it often only works in spots where you're quite confident of how your opponents are playing. Denying equity is not that valuable. Sometimes there will be turns or rivers where you let your opponent catch up. It's not the end of the world. It's poker. It happens. If you raise and get the information you need, which is, hey, my opponent has a set on 8-7-6, then it's expensive and you probably could have saved some money. But the real disastrous one is if you raise fold aces on 8-7-6 and your opponent has nines. Then it's a really disastrous play. And then the other thing I'll say here is, yeah, patience is a virtue on connected boards. If the board looks bad for your hand and that means you usually don't have that strong hand, and you want to wait until you have a strong hand before putting money in the pot. So yeah, that's lesson 1. Stop raising for information. Thank you for watching.